Hello. Do you think individuals shape history, or there's something beyond individuals that shape history and geopolitics and international relations? That's a key insight and key difference. So, for example, think for a second if there was no Hitler, or there was no Napoleon, or if there was no Gorbachev in the Soviet Union, what would have had happened in the history? Shall we start to think that individuals are so important that they are the ones who actually shape the interstate relationship and our history? We individuals, and given the current culture, frankly, in Hollywood, in pop culture, and pretty much everywhere, we can say people like to think that individuals are the key players in international politics and politics generally. We tend to cheer certain individuals. We tend to like dislike certain individuals. We tend to go very passionate about having one individual in office versus disliking another individual. But the question you always have to ask yourselves, if you want to start thinking critically, is there anything beyond individuals? And that is what I'm going to discuss today. And that is the structure of view. In other words, let's assume that there was no Napoleon, or let's assume there was none of these leaders that we know in 1914 in Europe. Would we still have a world war in 1914? Remember, if you think their individuals matter, then if you replace individuals, the history would have been different. Obviously, we can always tell because it's very hard to uh, recreate the history. But I would like invite you to think this way. In 1914, in fact, nobody wanted the war that actually happened. The leaders of the Europe sort of stumbled into it through miscalculation, alliance obligations, military timetables that took a life of their own, and a collective failure of imagination of what industrial age warfare would look like. In other words, sometimes there are factors beyond individuals' control that, in fact, lead to certain results. You can also think about Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. Yes, he was the one who introduced economic reform. He was the one who decided not to use the iron fist when some of the parts of the Soviet Union was turning against the Moscow. But the question is, remember, so when Gorbachev came into power, Soviet Union already drained a lot of resources in Afghanistan. And as a matter of fact, its economy wasn't doing very well. So was it really Gorbachev himself that caused it, or it was sort of the weight of the conditions at that time that led Soviet Union to be a little bit less heavy-handed, or a little bit more open? So generally, structures refer to the forces that exist independent of any individual. And it can be geography, economics, demography, technology, and international balance of power, cultural and historical patterns that accumulate over centuries. So I would like you to think of a river, and river has a flow of its own, right? It has is a stream, and it can stream can be higher. The pressure of the water can be higher or lower depending if there was rain, is it spring or summer or fall. And what you I would like you to imagine a swimmer that would like to swim against the current. Which one is going to be more important? When you think about it, most of the times is the stream, is the direction of the river. And to understand the geopolitics and international relations, the first step you should be doing, and all we all should be doing, is to step away from looking at individuals and look at the international relations as agential. I know that's a fancy word, as agent related, but more of a structural relationship. And That structure is very complex. I would like you to think of how complex the human body is and how the heart surgeon, has to know everything about the human body. Now think about it, with 100 times more complexity when it comes to international politics. You have history, you have geography, you have balance of power, you have technology, you have all sorts of factors. So then you start to realize that individuals are much, much less important. And in order to grasp a better strategic view of the international politics and have a better grasp of how the world works, you need to start putting individuals as one factor amongst many. And once you do that, you start to realize that, well, I have to learn much, much, much more in every circumstance rather than just focusing on one person. Oh, he was a dictator, or he was a reformist, or he was a hardliner, or he was a softie, or I should obviously say also she could be leaders can be like she was a hardliner, or she was into reform, or she led the movement, or she acted with a total impunity. All the stuff that we constantly talk about. Remember, it's mostly at the agentic level, at discussing the leaders, but that is one factor amongst many. If you want to enter into geopolitics and understand international relations, the first thing you should be doing is to think about the structure that make things happen, and how the structures different between different states and the structure of the whole international system, just a galaxy that I gave an example for, shape the international politics. With that, we are going to discuss some of the factors in the new videos, but I would like you to start thinking about the structures more as we going through these lectures. Thank you. Bye bye.